G'day taxpayers, a budget preview. In 6 days' time, Treasurer Jim Chalmers gets to his feet in the House of Representatives and he will deliver the government's budget statement. Now, a couple of aspects to think about when budgets are delivered. First of all is the macroeconomic framework, which is underpinning all of the budget settings. And on this score, this is about as good as it can ever get. And I mean that. It sounds like a very melodramatic statement to be making, but it's true. Think about this scenario. Jim Chalmers will be saying GDP growth will be accelerating to around about 2.5% over the next couple of years, so getting back towards trend after a troubled 2024, so economic growth will be getting a pretty big tick. That sort of economic growth will be enough to prevent the unemployment rate from going above 4.5%, and if anything, if that growth rate is sustained, we'll be getting a peak unemployment rate of 4.5%, which is stunning, and it'll start drifting back towards 4% in the subsequent years as the economy maintains that traction. The other fabulous news is that the budget will show the projections for inflation to be almost slap bang in the middle of the RBA target range, 2.5%. Yeah, there might be an odd 2.25%, 2.75%, depending on any measures that are included in the budget, particularly as it relates to energy relief and these sorts of things being extended into next financial year. But basically, the inflation rate will be slap bang on target. And while the RBA sets its interest rates according to its own decision, and the budget papers will not say this, it implies that there's interest rate cuts to be coming because inflation is very much under control. The other good news is that nominal wages growth will be forecast to increase by 3.25%, there or thereabouts. So when you overlay that with a 2.5% inflation rate, real wages are increasing. And to be sure, we're coming from a period of real financial stress over the last decade or so where real wages have been weak, but we've already had 1 year of real wage increases, and the budget's going to be forecasting several more years of real wage increases, with wages back to what we might call normal levels, 3.5% in annual terms, inflation back to where it's meant to be, 2.5%. That slow improvement in cost of living will occur, and that's actually feeding back on itself into one of the reasons why GDP growth is picking up. It's household consumption's coming back, so that's good news. So the macro settings are about as good as you could ever wish for. In terms of the budget, we're going to have puny deficits, about 1% of GDP in the current financial year and the next financial year, which is the year of targeting in this budget. So no big deal, absolutely appropriate given the economy has been weak previously, so running a little deficit when you've got a bit of a pullback in activities, absolutely fine. The curious thing, or not so curious, is that basically all of the budget deficit is accounted for by the stage 3 tax cuts, which Scott Morrison put in place when he was Prime Minister or Treasurer, 6 years ago. So they account for basically all of the budget deficit, plus the fact that the economy has been weak means that the revenue take has not been spiking as much as you would hope. But if we get through the next 2 years with budget deficits around 1% of GDP, so let's call that $25 to $35 billion, peanuts in other words, and then we get an improvement in the economy in the years after that, and we move back towards a balanced budget or even a surplus, dare I say. The fiscal settings are good, and government debts, in net terms, has come down about 10 percentage points over the last couple of years, which is great, taking pressure off the debt servicing costs because, of course, the government has to pay interest on its debt, like we all do. So there's a mix of good news there. So from a macro perspective, the economy, the government's finances, it's going to be about as good as it can get. Stay tuned for Tuesday night.